These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. In northern England, c. 1890, pit-brow lasses worked the surface screens, picking rock from coal after an 1842 law barred women from underground work. They wore trousers, aprons, and clogs for safety, and their image spread on Victorian postcards. Britain in the 1890s. Two performers use peg stilts with strapped footblocks and handposts, a standard setup for music halls and street shows. The rig let them run, dance, and rise 3 to 4 feet above crowds, a favorite act for parades and openings. Hand-cranked magnetotherapy device from about 1890 to 1910. Turning the handle spun coils and sent a mild pulse through the 2 brass wands. Sellers promised relief for pain and nerves, but by the 1910s, medical groups called it unproven, and many such gadgets faded away. Phyllis Wheatley was taken from West Africa to Boston in 1761 as a child, and by 13, she was writing polished verse in English. In 1773, she published Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral, becoming the first published African-American poet after a Boston panel confirmed her authorship. Officers inspect a balloon command crew in Britain, 1939-40, with a moored barrage balloon looming behind. At the peak of the Blitz, more than 4,000 of these gas-filled guards hovered over cities and docks, forcing enemy planes to fly higher and lose accuracy. June 1944. A V-1 flying bomb has just struck near Aldwych, and a tall cloud rises beyond Fleet Street while people keep walking. That summer, more than 8,000 of these pilotless weapons were launched at southern England, and the city adapted with alerts, shelters, and fast repairs. A pneumatic ship fender, an air-filled rubber cylinder wrapped in tires and chains, cushions contact between large vessels and a pier or another ship. Units can be several meters wide. This one likely broke loose and washed ashore after a storm. Early 1900s makers sold a collapsible steel vest for detectives and couriers. It sat as a belt and pulled up into stacked plates to shield the chest. It was heavy and only slowed low power shots, and it faded once lighter fabric vests arrived. A dark wall of dust rolls over a Great Plains town during the 1930s Dust Bowl. Years of drought and plowed prairie let wind lift topsoil into black blizzards that buried fields and pushed many families west. 1970s Hungary, a one-room earth house dug into a slope with a sod roof and stovepipe, typical of Roma putri on village edges. Built from clay and wood with tiny windows, most had no power or running water until late 1970s-1980s relocation programs. The giant moa of New Zealand went extinct around the 1400s. The tallest species could reach about 3.6 meters with neck and weigh over 200 kilograms. A tiny perfume pendant from the 1800s, early 1900s. The cap holds a small dipper so you can touch scent onto the skin. People wore these on a chain or chatelaine to mask street smells and, in that era, to ward off what they called bad air. Britain's big freeze of 1962-63 locked roads under deep drifts for weeks. Trains, schools, and deliveries halted, and some villages were cut off. From Boxing Day 1962 into March, many days stayed below freezing. Seawater iced along coasts, and even parts of the Thames froze. World War II mooring blocks for barrage balloons. The U-shaped iron rings on top held the tether cables, and the blocks were poured in long rows at launch sites like this. During the Blitz, Britain flew over 4,000 balloons to push aircraft above about 5,000 feet, and many of these anchor lines still remain. Aloha Wanderwell poses with the expedition Ford and her movie camera during the Wanderwell World Tour in the 1920s. From 1922 to 1927, she filmed in over 40 countries and became the first woman to drive around the world, turning the trek into popular travel films. The Antarctic snow cruiser, built in 1939 by the Armour Institute team for Richard Byrd's expedition, was a 55-foot, 75,000-pound lab on wheels with huge, smooth Goodyear tires. It performed poorly on ice, was left near Little America, and later vanished under snow and shifting shelf ice. Late 1800s, health jolting chair. A spring-loaded rocker with a foot treadle that bounced the sitter, sold as indoor horseback-style exercise. It rode the Victorian craze for mechanical fitness devices, promising better circulation and digestion for desk workers. A driver sits in A.G. Vanderbilt's 250-horsepower racer, C 1906, bare frame, exposed cylinders, chain drive, and no front brakes. Machines like this ran the early Vanderbilt Cup road races on Long Island, pushing toward 100 miles per hour on public roads before modern safety rules. Early 1900s hard hat diving, a canvas suit and copper helmet fed by a hand-pumped airbox with two tenders turning the cranks to keep air flowing. The diver wore a 30 to 40 kilogram lead collar and boots, walked the riverbed for hours, and used rope tugs to talk to the surface. Early 1900s wall telephone with the door open, a Kellogg magneto set, and two No. 6 Columbia dry cells power the transmitter. You rang the operator by turning the hand crank, then spoke through the separate receiver on the left. Around 1900 in Central Europe, a woman carries a child in a wooden back basket called a kraxi, common in alpine villages. These rigid frame baskets moved firewood, hay, and children, with the load shared by shoulder straps and sometimes a forehead strap for long walks. Bridgeport police ran a public test in about the late 1920s or early 1930s, using a Thompson to put a 10-second burst into a touring car. The display warned would-be robbers and sped up the move to armor screens and stronger glass on patrol cars in the Prohibition years. Coin-operated aspirin vending machine, 1930s to 1950s. Drop a dime and pull the lever to get a small envelope of 6 Reed's aspirin tablets. These stood in stations, factories, and hotel lobbies to offer quick pain relief before all-night pharmacies were common. Early 1900s Europe, itinerant tooth pullers worked in village squares, pulling aching teeth with simple pliers for coins or goods. With few rural dentists and little daily brushing then, street extractions offered fast relief, done on a stool, with no modern anesthesia or hygiene standards. An experimental tracked motorcycle tractor climbs a wall using a single powered track with large lugs and a braced front wheel. C. 1930s, 1940s. Built for trials in rough terrain, the gasoline engine drove the monotrack so it could scale steps, rubble, and steep slopes that defeated ordinary bikes. Women welders and riveters built much of the new Waterloo Bridge during World War II, earning it the nickname Ladies' Bridge. It opened to traffic in 1942 and was finished in 1945, using prefabricated steel and reinforced concrete sections to speed work under blackout conditions. Thor Heyerdahl steers the balsa wood raft Kon-Tiki in 1947, built with hand tools, 9 balsa logs, and hemp rope to mirror early methods. He and 5 crew left Peru, and after 101 days and about 4,300 miles, reached the Raroya Atoll in French Polynesia, testing if ancient South Americans could drift sail west. Early 1900s, far north Queensland. A Jirbal rainforest man climbs a smooth trunk using a loop of lawyer cane, Calamus australis, around his waist and feet to grip the bark. Swedish ethnographer Erik Mjoberg photographed this technique around 1913, used to reach wild honey, nuts, and lookout points high in the canopy. Boatmen leg a narrowboat through a tunnel with no towpath, lying on planks at the bow and pushing their feet against the brick walls to drive the boat. Before engines, long tunnels like Standedge or Blisworth could take hours at about 1 mile per hour using only muscle. Palm Sunday, April 11, 1954. A couple with 11 children line up in matching suits outside 3121 for church. In baby boom America, families often posed in coordinated Sunday best, and Palm Sunday marked the start of Holy Week. August 1961. East German police raise binoculars to watch a West Berlin photographer across the newly built barrier. In the first weeks of the Berlin Wall, both sides filmed and photographed each other daily, while checkpoints and guard posts took shape. Hattie Stewart stands in a boxer's stance, billed as a world female champion in 1884 when women's bouts toured with traveling shows. Most contests used Queensberry gloves on short stages and were sold as novelties, yet they drew big crowds and paid better than many jobs open to women then. Blue Gillette double-edge blades made in France, heat blued carbon steel to harden and slow corrosion. Wrappers show King C. Gillette, and each blade is paper-wrapped, built to the 1904 safety razor standard. Early 1900s Black Country. Miners at the Earl of Dudley's Himley pit crowd into a big iron bucket under the headframe to be lowered down the shaft by a steam winding engine. This man-riding method, called a kibble or bauk, was later replaced by safer cages and proper lifts. Polaire, Émilie Marie Bouchot, 1874-1939, was a Paris music hall star famed for a corseted waist advertised at about 16 inches and a striking curly bob. She headlined the Folies Bergère, toured London and New York, and later appeared in early films. Nose shield sunglasses, a 1930s novelty, added a leather or celluloid guard between the lenses to stop sunburn on the nose, marketed as a practical beauty aid. Patented by a Los Angeles inventor, they saw brief sales in beach towns before fading from fashion. Major August von Parseval flies one of his early non-rigid airships, a hydrogen envelope with an engine gondola and tail fins for real steering. From 1906, his Parseval blimps logged many flights for training and reconnaissance as a cheaper, simpler rival to Zeppelins. In Romania's Apuseni Mountains, women play the tulnik, a straight spruce horn about 2 to 3 meters long, split, hollowed, and glued. Its clear call once signaled herders and gatherings, carrying across valleys for kilometers. People once slept with a nickel-plated wire head net, fine mesh, and a silk tie, sold by mail in the 1890s to 1910s to block insects. It weighed 1 ounce and cost $1, a personal shield before window screens were common. A double amputee displays early above-knee prosthetic legs by Charles Salmon and Sons, London, c. 1920, with steel knee joints and leather hip belts. These catalog models replaced simple peg legs with locking knees, giving users real walking mobility. July 4th weekend at Nantasket Beach, Massachusetts, around 1925. Rows of early cars sit right on the sand because paved lots were scarce. The crowd shows the car boom. By the mid-1920s, there were over 10 million Model Ts on the road, so beaches became day trip spots people could drive to. Fifth Avenue, c. 1920. A biplane is hauled on a flatbed with the engine running, the spinning propeller showing it was flight-ready even at parade speed. Such street demos pushed aviation into daily life right after U.S. airmail began in 1918, when many city crowds had never seen a plane up close. 1922. Children light firecrackers by hand and even hold them, a common scene before safety laws and slow burn fuses became standard. Safe and sane drives and city bans in the 1910s, 1920s pushed safer July 4th habits and cut accidents. Reno, July 4th, 1910, World Heavyweight Champ. Jack Johnson defeats former champ Jim Jeffries in the outdoor fight of the century. The bout ended in round 15 when Jeffries' corner stopped it, and the filmed match became one of the first blockbuster sports movies shown nationwide. This is an imperial tubing cutter used by plumbers and HVAC techs to cut copper or thin steel pipe with the adjustable hardened wheel. The sharp tip is a reamer that cleans the inside burr after the cut, so fittings seal tight. Daytona Beach staged stock car races on a sand and surf course July 4, 1940, with cars flying on hard-packed shoreline and clawing through soft turns. Beach racing here ran from 1903 to 1958 and led to NASCAR in 1948 and the later Daytona 500 at the paved speedway. Hugh, 1968. After the Tet Offensive, vendors and cyclists returned to streets lined with shattered French-era facades. Much of the historic quarter was damaged, yet markets reopened within weeks as repairs began. Moscow, 1928. Soviet units march in gas masks and rubberized suits during a large civil defense drill. Between the world wars, such training taught troops and city workers how to seal filters, decontaminate gear, and move in formation in case of harmful gas. Around 1900, a traveling dentist uses a foot treadle drill while helpers hold the patient still, common for pop-up clinics in yards and fairs. Portable rigs like this handled extractions and fillings long before electric drills and reliable numbing reached small towns. A homemade whole-house radio console built from Atwater Kent parts about 1928-1935. The big dials tune the set, and the jeweled toggles route the station to speakers in different rooms, an early home audio hub. Promotional still for the ultra-low-budget sci-fi Mesa of Lost Women, shot in 1951 and released in 1953, featuring its Spider-Woman prop. Recut by the distributor, it later gained cult status for patchwork editing, frantic guitar music, and bargain effects. 1912. Women in China wear tiny lotus shoes, the result of a status custom begun in childhood aiming for the famed 3-inch foot. The New Republic banned it that year, yet unbinding leagues formed because the practice persisted into the 1920s-1930s. Alcatraz posted exact daily menus. On March 13, 1956, the meal was 2 grilled frankfurters with chili, parsley potatoes, sauerkraut, buttered carrots, mustard, banana pudding, 2 rolls, bread, and tea. The prison aimed for decent food to keep order, a practice many former staff and inmates later noted. MIT's entrance algebra exam, dated June 7, 1869, asked students to simplify expressions, factor, and solve linear equations entirely by hand. Admission then depended on written tests like this in core math, long before calculators or multiple-choice forms. Chicago, 1893. George Ferris built a 264-foot wheel with 36 cars, each holding about 60 people. Steam engines turned it, moving more than 2,000 riders at once and launching a new steel landmark. Atlanta, 1898. Early Coca-Cola employees pose at 179 Edgewood Avenue, the company's headquarters and syrup plant, run by Asa Candler. A year later, the 1899 bottling franchise deal would send the drink nationwide. Early 1900s telegraph switchboard, 4 vertical circuits with brass posts and carbon lightning arresters to protect lines during storms. Operators used the side switches to route more circuits between lines and sounders, an early network hub about 10 inches wide. 1979, West Germany. Senhai Sun and Hei Sun exchanged rings while hanging by their hair beneath a hovering helicopter. Photographed by Keystone, Getty, this rare aerial wedding is scarcely documented, which adds to its mystery. Self-closing log, beam tongs, CU 1870, made by A.J. Nellis and Cummers of Pittsburgh. Clip a chain to the eye, lift, and the cam bites tighter to hoist heavy timbers. Used in lumberyards and rail depots long before forklifts. London, 1968. A glass-walled aquarium microcar, built as a Publicity one-off cruises through traffic, with riders on inflatable seats inside a clear perspex box. Only a handful were made in 1967-1968, topping out near 45 mm. spectacle over safety. London, Oct. 1971. A recruitment agency staged office aerobics on desks for press photos during Britain's Keep Fit craze. It was a publicity setup to promote the firm, not an actual workplace routine. 1980, Miami Gardens Elementary in Florida. A 5-foot teaching robot named Neutro taught vitamins and food groups as part of a public service program. Many schools in the late 1970s and early 1980s used visiting robots to promote science and health before classroom computers were common. Feb 5, 1947, Marine Studios in Florida. Helmeted performers played underwater ping pong while a sand shark glided past during a Miami Fashion Council show. The huge film tanks were built for sea scenes and stunts, making the Oceanarium a post-war publicity magnet. November 1969, England. Car salesman Ian Newman linked his hair to his girlfriend Gloria Wooten's with a chain so they wouldn't get separated on dance nights, then posed for press photos. The stunt hit local papers as a novelty tied to the era's long hair craze. 1960s Britain. Professor Leonard Tomlin ran one of the last real flea circuses, training human fleas in tiny wire harnesses. His troupe toured fairs where the fleas pulled miniature chariots, rang bells, and turned small Ferris wheels under a magnifier. Late 1960s, New York's Americana Hotel. A Pennsylvania store staged an emancipated menswear show with sequins, knit sets, and even a micro bikini to defy dress codes. The stunt tested buyers just before unisex styles and leisure suits hit in the early 1970s. July 8, 1921, Polo Grounds. Yankees star Babe Ruth faced surf-casting champion Harold G. Lentz. Ruth's best hits fell short of Lentz's casts of 392, 402, 440, and 438 feet, so Lentz won. The New York Evening Journal staged the contest, and papers noted Ruth had recently hit a 500-foot home run in Detroit. Springfield, 1891-1892. Dr. James Naismith, in the suit, with his first basketball squad from the YMCA training school, posed beside the original peach baskets used as goals. Early games used a soccer ball and required a ladder to fetch each made shot until holes were cut in the basket bottoms. Created under the Tea Importation Act of 1897, the U.S. Board of Tea Experts met in New York to cup and compare hundreds of samples so weak or adulterated teas could not enter the country. They graded leaf, aroma, and liquor against official standards until the law was repealed in 1996. Victorian studios used a hidden headrest stand. The forked metal prong cradled the skull so sitters didn't wobble during multi-second exposures. Faster plates and shutters later killed the need for these steadying supports. Before May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens stood 9,177 feet. After the blast, it was about 8,363 feet with a mile-wide crater. The eruption triggered the largest landslide ever recorded and sent ash to roughly 80,000 feet. Early 1950s Las Vegas. Hotel guests watch a mushroom cloud from the Nevada test site about 65 miles away. Casinos even held dawn viewing parties during series like Upshot Knothole until the 1963 ban on above-ground tests. RMS Olympic in dry dock shows the Olympic-class setup. 3 propellers, 2 outer screws about 23 feet across, and a center screw about 16 feet, driven by steam engines and a turbine. The worker by the rudder gives scale for a ship 882 feet long, built to the same design as Titanic. Imperial Airways mid-1920s airliners, like the Handley Page W8, W10, used bus-style bench seats, open hat racks, and unpressurized cabins, loud, drafty, and codon flying. They cruised roughly 100 and 120 mph at 3,000–5,000 feet with frequent fuel stops and strong engine vibration. 1933. Wales gifted 7-year-old Princess Elizabeth a child-size thatched cottage, Y. Buthen Bach, with working lights, hot water, and a phone. It still stands at Windsor's Royal Lodge and has been used by royal children for decades. A coiled python skeleton shows 200 to 400 vertebrae, each with paired ribs, forming a spring-like body built to twist and grip. A flexible skull and backward curved teeth pull food inward without limbs. 1950s TWA first class on a Lockheed Super G Constellation meant white tablecloth meals and lounge seating in a pressurized 4-engine airliner. It cruised about 300 mph with service closer to a restaurant than a row of seats. This US $500 bill shows President William McKinley. High-denomination notes like this were printed through 1945 and pulled from use in 1969. It's still legal tender, but collectors often pay well above face value, sometimes thousands, depending on condition and serial. Aukin 2, 1988, Farmer Jack receipt. Total $21.76 for a card of basics. Ketchup $1.49, applesauce $0.66, tuna $0.59, spare ribs $1.39. In today's dollars, that haul is roughly 50 hours, showing how much everyday prices climbed. Late 1960s, the Twin Towers climb using kangaroo cranes perched on the new steel tube frame, which let floors go up fast. Work began in 1966. The North Tower topped in 1970, the South in 1971, and the original WTC opened in 1973. Norwegian speed skater Oscar Mathisen poses in a suit of medals from his dominant 1908-1914 run. A 5-time world all-round champion, he set multiple world records that stood for years and made him the sport's first global star. 1918, Camp Dix, New Jersey. Photographer Arthur Mole arranged about 25,000 soldiers into a human Liberty Bell, shot from a tall tower for perfect lines. These giant, living photographs promoted wartime bond drives and morale on the home front. Marial Water Park on Ketaifan Island, North, Qatar, was built around the steel Icon Tower, which carries the Guinness certified tallest waterslide. The oil rig-themed tower stacks dozens of intertwined flumes on one frame, trading footprint for extreme height. 1920s doctors advertised early cosmetic work, facelifts, ear pinning, and nose reshaping, with bold before and after photos. Many methods came from World War I reconstructive advances like skin flaps, cartilage grafts, and local anesthesia. A night satellite view shows a sharp divide. South Korea glows with dense city lights, while North Korea is mostly dark, with a faint cluster at Pyongyang. The contrast reflects limited grid supply and electrification in the north versus a highly powered network in the south. Hiram, shown in 1907, was advertised as the world's largest horse, 21 hands tall, 7 feet at the shoulders, and about 3,065 pounds. Most draft horses are 16 to 18 hands, so he stood roughly a foot taller and weighed far more than typical giants. At about 12,500 feet down, the pantry's wooden shelves rotted away and dropped stacks of heavy porcelain plates neatly onto the seafloor. Ceramics do not rust. So many dishes and bottles survived in tidy piles in the wreck's debris field. Wiltshire. Drivers on the A303 get a clear side view of Stonehenge across the open chalk plain, only a few hundred meters from the road. The monument now sits inside a busy road corridor, which is why slowdowns often form at this bend. In 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt visited Yosemite with naturalist John Muir. This photo shows him above Yosemite Falls. Their campout pushed U.S. conservation, including the 1906 move that put Yosemite Valley and the Mariposa Grove under national park control. In January 1966, a brutal blizzard hit the U.S. Northeast and Great Lakes, dumping several feet of snow and blasting towns with whiteout winds. Drifts rose higher than doorways, temperatures fell below zero, and entire cities shut down for days. Jamie Lee Curtis trains in the 1985 film Perfect, playing an aerobics instructor opposite John Travolta as a reporter. Inspired by magazine stories about the health club boom, the film bombed with critics but became a cult snapshot of 1980s fitness style. This photo is a modern recreation. The real recycling symbol was designed in 1970 by 23-year-old Gary Anderson for a national contest linked to the first Earth Day. His 3 arrows, inspired by a Mobius loop and the paper cycle, became a global mark on packaging and bins. AI recreation of a 1950s magazine concept, a ride-on mower with a clear bubble canopy and built-in cooling for the suburban boom. Designers teased sealed, dust-free mowing and comfort gadgets like this, but none reached production. Crowds gather at Oregon City in 1906 around an ox-drawn covered wagon and a stone reading, "End of the Old Oregon Trail, 1843-1906. The 2,170-mile trail carried about 400,000 emigrants from the Missouri River to Oregon during the 1840s-1860s. A reggae singer relaxes with ping pong in 1980, the same year he toured worldwide behind the Uprising album. He was famous for daily pickup football and quick table tennis duels between studio sessions at Tough Gong. Thomas C. Poulter stands beside a 10-foot Goodyear tire from the Antarctic snow cruiser in 1938. The 55-foot, 75,000-pound machine was built to cross crevasses, but its smooth tires sank in snow and it was left on the ice a few years later. Albert Einstein speaks at Princeton in 1950, urging caution about the plan to build the hydrogen bomb and the growing U.S.-Soviet arms race. He backed international control of atomic energy and warned that unchecked rivalry could endanger humanity. Ethel Granger, photographed in 1959, trained her waist to 13 inches through years of daily corset wear. She held the smallest documented waist of the 20th century and later inspired fashion shoots and museum displays. In the 1880s, women from Syria, Japan, and India trained at the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. K. Okami and Anandibai Joshi earned MDs in 1886, with Sabat Islambuli soon after, among the first women doctors from their countries. An 1879 bank check for $105 would be roughly $3,000 in today's money. The blue revenue stamp shows the federal tax on checks that was still used then and ended in 1883. In the 1930s, people in southern Arizona decorated a towering saguaro like a Christmas tree, a desert twist on the holidays. Saguaros can reach 40-60 feet and live well over a century, and they are protected today across much of Arizona, so scenes like this aren't encouraged now. A young Fidel Castro appears clean-shaven in prison photos from 1953 after the Moncada barracks attack in Cuba. He was freed in a 1955 amnesty and soon grew the beard that became his signature look. An orphan adopted by a Soviet air regiment writes, "For Mom, for Dad," on aircraft ordnance during World War II. Minutes later, the crew flew the signed payloads across the front to hit military targets. Workers built Hoover Dam in Black Canyon in 1932, after the Colorado River was diverted through 4 tunnels. Finished in 1936, it rose 726 feet and used over 3 million cubic yards of concrete to power the Southwest. In 1942, a U.S. Army motor pool sign lists daily checks, grease joints, refill the grease gun, water, oil, gas, and ends with, "No alibi, soldier." Wartime posters linked careful maintenance to duty and readiness, keeping jeeps and trucks reliable for training and service. On Aug 2021, 1968, Warsaw Pact forces from 5 countries entered Czechoslovakia to stop the Prague Spring reforms. In Prague, armor rolled through the streets. This photo shows a tank forcing into a building as crowds watched. Washington, D.C., early 1920s, Model T era cars and a Coca-Cola druggist sign line a slushy street with row shops. The U.S. Capitol rises at right, capturing the city just before its big 1930s building boom reshaped these blocks. During their 1951 Canadian tour, Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip joined a country-style square dance in Ottawa, an unusually informal moment for the future queen. The next year, she became Queen Elizabeth II. In 1965, some clinics tested pressurized birth suits that promised easier labor and even smarter babies. The claims failed to show solid results, and the devices quickly disappeared. In late 1944, a burning Japanese kamikaze dives toward the U.S. carrier USS Essex, CV-9, during Pacific operations. Essex survived the strike and later finished the war with 13 battle stars. Evenki people in Siberia, photographed in 1888, wear bead-trimmed reindeer hide clothing built for the subarctic taiga. They were nomadic hunters and herders who traveled by reindeer and birch-bark canoe, moving camp with the seasons. Deluxe wooden case Monopoly from the mid-1930s, sold just a year after Parker Brothers launched the game in 1935. Early cabinet sets like this used wood trays with money, wooden houses and hotels, and a hinged case for tidy play. In 1903, South Africa, two Zulu people pose with a handmade Zulu motor, a wooden wagon wheel car fitted with tin lanterns at a time when real autos were still rare. Props like this appeared in Natal for parades and postcards, mixing early car style with local craft. In 1906, Chicago, Julius Duke was detained for wearing women's clothing under a city ordinance that banned cross-dressing. Similar laws existed in many U.S. cities in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and were later repealed. A Kirby upright from the 1960s-70s, die-cast aluminum body, metal brush head, and a cloth dust bag built to be serviced and rebuilt for decades. Many of these U.S.-made machines still run today, which is why collectors prize them in excellent condition. Anarchist militiamen in 1936. Spain, ride a Fordson tracked tractor used as an improvised fighting vehicle, a type locals called "tis now." In the war's early months, volunteer columns like these held cities such as Barcelona and Madrid before a regular army formed. Saturn V first stages under construction at NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility in New Orleans, 1968. These SIC sections with 5 F-1 engine mounts would send Apollo crews to the Moon, including missions 14-16. After the May 1940 air raid, central Rotterdam lay in ruins. The Lawrencekerk stands alone amid cleared foundations and canals. Around 85,000 residents lost their homes, and the city later chose a bold modern rebuild that reshaped its skyline. A Yemenite Jewish silversmith sells filigree jewelry in Sana'a in the mid-1900s. Soon after, most Yemeni Jews left in Operation Magic Carpet, 1949-1950, and markets like this faded. Former U.S. President Harry Truman meets Pablo Picasso in Vallauris, France, 1958. Truman stopped by the artist's studio on the Riviera, where Picasso was producing ceramics and posters for the town's festivals. In October 1955, the trader M.V. Joyita left Apia for Tokelau with 25 people and never arrived. 5 weeks later, it was found adrift north of Fiji, listing and with radios set to send an emergency call. The lifeboats, logs, and much of the cargo were gone, and no trace of those aboard was ever found, one of the Pacific's lasting sea mysteries. Oak Island, Nova Scotia, site of the long-running Money Pit hunt, has defeated diggers since the 1800s, as shafts repeatedly flood through seawater channels. Dozens of 20th-century expeditions tried pumps, drills, and tunnels, yet no confirmed treasure has been found. In 1955, hospital staff took a boy with paralysis outside to work on arm movement by throwing balls at coconuts on posts, a carnival-style coconut shy used as rehab. Playful therapy like this boosted range of motion and morale before modern physiotherapy gear. Workers assemble one of the 9 spheres of the atomium in Brussels for Expo 58. The 102-meter monument models an iron crystal magnified 165 billion times, with 18-meter spheres linked by tubes visitors could ride through. Winter 1963 froze the North Sea at Rokkanje, Netherlands. Falling tide and wave spray undercut the shore ice, leaving a mushroom-shaped ice table on a thin stem. Peggy Fleming shows her gold medal at the 1968 Winter Olympics in Grenoble, won in ladies' singles figure skating. It was the United States' only gold of those games and helped revive American figure skating after the 1961 team loss. A Finnish soldier leads a pack reindeer across glassy ice near Nautsi, Lapland, October 26, 1941. Finnish and Sami handlers used reindeer to carry supplies and mail in the Arctic, where trucks could not go. Before electronic gates, London Underground staff sorted paper tickets by hand to measure use by station and time of day. These piles of stubs guided schedules, staffing, and future line planning. In the 1960s, Frank Abagnale posed as a Pan Am pilot, doctor, and lawyer, while passing millions in fake checks across 26 countries before being caught at 21. He later worked as a fraud expert and inspired the 2002 film Catch Me If You Can. On May 9, 1945, Prague residents cheer as a Soviet soldier plays an accordion during the city's liberation. The music filled central streets just after Red Army units arrived, ending 6 years of occupation. An inventor tries a backpack helicopter with a small piston engine and 2-blade rotor, one of many personal flight experiments in the mid-1900s. Most prototypes managed only short hops due to torque, vibration, and safety limits, but they paved the way for later gyrocopters and jetpacks. Tunnel rat duty. A U.S. Marine checks a narrow tunnel with a flashlight in 1969. These volunteers crawled in alone to map traps and storage, carrying only a sidearm and light in tight air and darkness. Rock icons meet between shows in 1969, with Hendrix fresh from major festival stages and Jagger steering the Rolling Stones toward a huge tour. Their bold suits and scarves set the late 1960s look, and within a year, Hendrix would be gone, making moments like this feel rare. In 1933, party squads staged loud street actions outside Jewish-owned shops to drive customers away during the first nationwide boycott. This was an early step in state-backed exclusion that grew much worse in the following years. A long banquet fills the ballroom of the new Hotel Astor in New York City, photographed in 1904, the year it opened in Times Square. The hotel soon became a showcase for grand dinners and music on its roof garden before it was demolished in 1967. First-class passengers on RMS Titanic used cycle machines in the ship's new gym, which also featured a mechanical horse and a camel. The large wall dial tracked speed and distance, and sessions ran in set hours for men and for women, early luxury fitness at sea. In 1992, in San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas, people pulled down the statue of 16th-century conquistador Diego de Mazariegos during the 500th-year events tied to 1492. The moment set off a wider debate in Mexico about who should be honored in public squares, a question that later echoed in many places. Henryka Heniuta Wieczorek of the Polish underground stands with a sidearm on the last day of the Warsaw Uprising, October 2, 1944. For 63 days, civilian volunteers held city blocks, carrying messages and supplies through rubble until the rising was forced to end. The Orient Express began service in 1883, linking Paris with Eastern Europe in luxury cars built by the Wagons-Litz Company. Restored lounge cars kept the look: deep armchairs, polished wood, and table lamps, rail travel like a moving grand hotel. A grandson sits in the exact riverside spot in Florence where his grandfather posed in 1944. The same skyline near the Ponte Vecchio links two photos across 70-plus years, turning family memory into living city history. Robert Wadlow, the tallest recorded man at 8'11" in 272 mm, towers over a jockey at a racetrack in the late 1930s. He wore size 37 AA shoes and often appeared at public events with sponsors, drawing large crowds. In 1999, Vladimir Putin became Boris Yeltsin's chosen successor, named Prime Minister in August and acting president on December 31st. The photo shows him with colleagues during the rapid rise that led to the 2000 election. A German U-boat runs on the surface, its bow cutting through heavy seas as crews stand near the conning tower. Submarines often surface to travel faster and to recharge batteries, a risky routine in the Atlantic hunt. The Russian Federation Government House in Moscow is shown during the October 1993 constitutional crisis, its upper floors glowing and the facade marked by smoke. The scene became a stark image of a turning point in post-Soviet politics. Time's January 2, 1984 issue named Ronald Reagan and Yuri Andropov, Men of the Year, shown back-to-back in a Cold War portrait. The cover reflected the tense mood of 1983-84 as missiles and talks shaped the era. On The Matrix, set in 1998, stunt workers in green suits used boards, wires, and harnesses to tilt Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss while the scene was filmed on a green screen. Later, the team erased the helpers and mixed the shot with the movie's bullet time tools, multi-camera rigs and frame tricks that changed action effects. Before pumpkins, people in Ireland carved faces into turnips and potatoes for lanterns at Halloween, a custom tied to old tales of Jack and wandering lights. When Irish families moved to the United States, they chose pumpkins because they were bigger and easier to carve, and the custom spread. A rare ground photo shows the two-tier cloud over Hiroshima minutes after the 6 August 1945 explosion, taken from Kaitaichi, about 10 kilometers east of the city center. Very few images caught this view from land. Another frame from the departing Enola Gay shows distinct ring layers in the cloud. Ham, the first chimpanzee sent to space, flew on Mercury Redstone 2 on January 31, 1961, to test the capsule's life support and controls. He returned safely the same day and later lived for years at U.S. zoos, proving human flights could follow. A U.S. Navy jet accidentally landed on the wrong aircraft carrier during 1952 operations. The deck crew covered the Panther with chalk jokes and directions, then launched it back to its own ship. Selma Burke sculpted a life-size bas-relief of Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1944, topped with his 4 freedoms. The 1946 Roosevelt Dimes profile by John R. Sinek closely mirrors Burke's portrait, and many credit her work as the model. USS Langley started as the Collier Jupiter and was converted in 1920-22 into America's first aircraft carrier, CV-1, the Navy's testbed for catapults and arresting gear. Reclassified as Seaplane Tender AV-3 in 1937, she was disabled by air attacks south of Java on Feb 27, 1942, and scuttled by her escorts. Daniel Lambert, 1770-1809, of Leicester, was recorded as the heaviest Briton of his era, reaching about 739 pounds with a waist measuring 9 feet 4 inches. A former jail keeper, he later received paying visitors in London and died in Stamford at age 39. 1933-1937. Chief Engineer Joseph Strauss slung a giant safety net under the Golden Gate Bridge, unheard of on past U.S. megaprojects. It caught 19 falling workers, later called the Halfway to Hell Club, and sharply reduced fatalities versus earlier bridge builds. 1869, Moliagal, Victoria, the welcome stranger, weighed about 2,520 troy ounces, 160 pounds, and was smashed on an anvil to weigh. It sold the same day for $9,534, about $970,000 today, and was melted into bars in Melbourne. Norma Smallwood of Tulsa won Miss America in 1926 at Atlantic City. She then turned the crown into business, landing paid national endorsements and department store appearances, a first for the pageant. Lincoln was born in a one-room log cabin at Sinking Spring Farm near Hodgenville, Kentucky, in 1809. The iconic cabin people see today is a symbolic reconstruction made from 19th-century logs and housed at the Abraham Lincoln Birthplace Memorial. Ahmet Ali Çelikten trained at the Ottoman Naval Aviation School and flew World War I reconnaissance, making him one of the earliest documented black military pilots. His career overlapped with pioneer Eugene Bullard, placing him at the very start of military aviation in the 1910s. Turin's Lingotto plant, opened 1923, built cars floor by floor, then sent them up spiral ramps to a 1 kilometers banked test track on the roof. Production ended in 1982, and Renzo Piano's redesign preserved the rooftop oval as a protected landmark. Venice periodically drains and dredges canals to scrape centuries of mud and trash. Here, beneath the Bridge of Sighs, the bridge links the Doge's palace to the old prison, famed as the prisoner's last glimpse of daylight. 1952. The first Mr. Potato Head came as sharp pushpin eyes, noses, and hats meant to poke into a real potato, also suggested for oranges, beets, apples, and peppers. By 1964, it switched to a plastic potato body after safety rules and soggy produce complaints. Mid-century, loop-the-loop motordromes ran tiny cars around a full vertical ring, using centripetal force to keep them on the track. Drivers often pulled roughly 3G at speed, a physics showpiece that faded as modern safety rules reshaped fares. USS Hunchback crew in Virginia, 1865. This sidewheel New York ferry was rebuilt as a Union gunboat that fought on the James River and in North Carolina. Unlike the segregated Army, the Union Navy enlisted black and white sailors together. By war's end, about 1 in 5 sailors were black. From 1908 to 1942, Sears sold kit homes like this 10-room colonial for $5,275, shipped by rail with 10,000-plus numbered parts and a step-by-step manual. Tens of thousands were built, and many still stand with original stamped lumber in their frames. Joseph C. Gaiety launched Gaiety's Medicated Paper in 1857, the first commercially packaged toilet paper in the U.S., sold as flat aloe-treated sheets watermarked with his name. Perforated rolls only took off later with Scott paper in the 1890s. Late 1800s, early 1900s, hotels posted notices like this when switching from gas lamps to Edison electric light, telling guests not to strike matches and to use the wall key switch. Early adopters even reassured travelers that electric lighting wouldn't harm health or disturb sleep. July 1885, Mount McGregor. The final photo of Ulysses S. Grant shows him on the porch finishing his memoirs while battling throat cancer. He died days later on July 23rd, and the book's huge sales secured his family's finances. Write your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel. I really want 100,000 subscribers.